we take the time to meditate on our lessons in light of all that is transpiring in our world. The pain, suffering, violence. So in light of the pain and the despair that can engulf our community, we come today to hear the call of response. How shall we respond in midst of this? What is our statement? How shall we speak into this, both individually and collectively? And then in that response, how do we then activate it? And what is the actionable aspect of this response? Our lessons lay out very powerfully an inconvenient truth that to follow Jesus is to pick up your cross and not pick up a gun. It's to pick up another human being and not to throw down with your pride and your ego. The flood of emotions that consume us today. It echoed in Longfellow's poem. I don't know. I just regressed into that Christmas mode. But those words in his song, Bells on Christmas Morning. And in despair I bowed my head, and there is no peace on earth, I said. For hate is strong, and mocks the song of peace on earth, goodwill to all. But then he shifted, and pealed the bells more loud and deep. God is not dead, nor doth God sleep. The wrong shall fail, the right prevail, with peace on earth, goodwill to all. So in that shift, how do we enter that shift? Because we are called into the fray. We're not called to hide into bunkers until the coast is clear. But it's how we enter. It begins with us denying our agendas, our egos. Our gospel is so clear. And Peter had his agenda and his own understanding of how Jesus was going to behave and how they were going to respond to Jesus' recognition, call to them that he was going to suffer and he was going to die and he was going to raise from the dead. So we need to get rid of our agendas of how we want this thing to go. And when you die to yourself and then you pick up your cross, and what does that cross represent? It is sacrifice. It is also representative of your shame and your guilt and your pain. But in doing that and picking up that cross, and then you follow Jesus and you enter the fray, and in your cross you recognize all those who are being crucified. And then you respond in love and humility and knowing that you bear your cross. So, I had sent out earlier today just some examples that we talk about our statement. How do we respond? One was our baptismal covenant, which clearly states that we are to deny Satan, evil in this world, and to work for the good, and also that we are to work for the justice and dignity of every human being. And I did share the clergy of the Westerville area, including myself, with a small group, put together a statement. You realize that statements and also words in a book mean nothing unless they are incarnated in our bodies and in our minds and our thoughts and our words. A statement must be written in our very lives. We are to embody these responses to a world of evil. And how shall we respond? And then our lessons point to the cross in the gospel lesson. They point to love. They point to sacrifice. So, in actions of small acts of kindness and love, the seeds to mighty movements of God's love and charity. Romans then begins to lay out. So I ask you, what is your statement? What is your response? And it is not fighting fire with fire, it is picking up the cross and picking up your brother or sister, your sibling. It is to enter the fray in radical love and compassion. A statement like Jesus that would say, anytime we are tempted to put our agendas, how we think this thing should work out, we are to die, kill those agendas. Die to yourself. Pick up your cross and follow Jesus. It could be like I imagine myself before Peter. In my conversation to Jesus, I can only speak to my statement and response before we can authentically collect our response. It could be Jesus coming to me, and before I can have an authentic voice, Jesus would say, well, Joel, you need to die. That when I call you, Jesus says, I bid you come and die to your ego and to your pride and how you want things to be. And then you pick up your cross, your suffering, your liberation, your image of shame, your humility. And then follow me. I might say, Jesus, where are you going? Oh, you're going there? Well, I couldn't. You know, they are my enemies. Or you know, they scare me. Or you know, they are evil. Or you know, I can't relate to them. You really want me to follow you there? This is the whole process of what it means to respond to evil in this world. We need to respond to evil with the good. And we need to be the good and have it imprinted on our bodies. Prophets always wore on their bodies the sin of society. So the statement, the word of solidarity. We are watching a world where our children are killing each other in the streets and adults are failing to protect our youngest, most vulnerable children. And yeah, we cry out and we need to lament. That cry leads us into relationship to Christ in each other. How shall we respond to pain and hatred and murder? We need to pick up one another in love. First responders in radical compassion and love. Unless you die to your opinions and agenda and yourself and pick up your cross and follow Jesus, it's a non-starter because all you do is seep into your own agendas and your own anger takes over. I'll close with two images. Dietrich Bonhoeffer writes in his Life Together book, in his chapter on community. He says, Jesus Christ lived in the midst of his enemies, and at the end, all his disciples deserted him. And on the cross, he was utterly alone, surrounded by evildoers and mockers. For this cause, he had to come, to bring peace to the enemies of God. And so the Christian, too, belongs not to the seclusion of a cloistered life, but in the thick of foes. There is their commission and their work. The kingdom is to be in the midst of your enemies. And they who will not suffer this do not want to be in the kingdom with Christ. It's our gospel today. They who want to be amongst friends or sit with roses and lilies. We are to be uncomfortable in the fact that we are to love our enemies. Bless those who persecute us. That goes against the grain of our humanity and our agendas. Let love, mutual love, continue. Hebrews writes, do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing that some have entertained angels without knowing it. Remember those who are in prison as though you were in prison with them, and those who are being tortured as though you yourselves were being tortured. That is what Jesus is calling us into. And as prophets bore on their bodies the sin of the people, we carry the cross in the name of love. And so, we want to be about restorative justice, regenerative living, not retributive justice. So ask yourself, how are you loving? How are you forgiving? Who are your friends? And who are your enemies? And why do you have enemies? And where do you live? And where do you shop? And what do you read? And how do you speak? And what do you listen to? And who do you follow? In that, Christ has to be infused in every answer you have. And then close, and I would ask you to meditate on our Romans text, because that is the tool, the action of which we follow Jesus into the fray with. Let love be genuine. Hate what is evil. Hold fast to what is good. Love one another with mutual affection. Outdo one another, showing honor. It goes on and on. Do not be arrogant. Do not repay anyone evil for evil, but take thought of what is noble in the sight of all. So, do not be overcome with evil, my brothers and sisters, my siblings, but let us overcome evil with good. That is what it means to follow Jesus into the fray. Do not be afraid. Let us go together and let our lives be the statement, a collective statement of justice.